Hello everyone. A big warm welcome to all of you on my expert series of the podcast for special needs children. In this episode, I'm delighted to have Miss Shilpi Kapoor with us. Shilpi Kapoor is a serial entrepreneur with a passion for technology and disability, striving to make digital accessibility a priority. As the founder of Barrier Break and 247 Accessible Documents, she has created Newshook, India's first inclusive news website and app. Recognized as one of the top 15 women transforming India by Niti Aayog in 2019 and one of the top 20 most powerful women in business by Business Today in 2017, Shilpi is an Ashoka Fellow and recipient of the NCP EDP Shell Helen Keller Award 2008 for a role in increasing employment opportunities for people with disabilities. In today's conversation, Shilpi will be sharing her inspiring journey, the challenges she has overcome, and a vision for the future of digital accessibility. Hey Shilpi, so wonderful to have you. And meeting you after all these years is really, really great. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast with me.
Well, thank you, Chitra, for inviting me. It is really a pleasure. I think we met maybe 15, 18 years back.
Yes.
That is quite a lifetime. But whenever I think of autism in Mumbai, I think of you.
Yeah, and whenever I think about anything to do with, so that time I reached out to you specifically for a device for my son. And I know so many of our families who have reached out to you at Barry Bricks to uh, figure out how to help their kids with communication. So thank you for doing this wonderful work over the years. And coming to the first question, could you please share a bit about, how this entire journey started for you and primarily about Barrier Breaks? How did you set it up?
So, Chitra, I'll go back in time to tell you a little about myself. So, as a young kid in college, in school, I was horrible in my studies. As in, my parents would have to literally celebrate if I passed, right? But the one thing my father did very early on was he gave me a computer when I was 10 years of age. At that time, you used to have these computers where you used to hook it onto a television set and you could code, right? So, the one thing I realized was that I was a great coder. But because of my own education, and if you remember the time we were all growing up, you had to do engineering to do, computer sciences, which was not something I was capable of doing. So I think my parents instilled in me that, you can be self-taught. Everything doesn't have to be taught by somebody professionally. And I started to learn computers on my own. So learned computers, at my college, I was the person who helped them automate the entire students' engagement for the first time.
Which college?
Xavier's.
Wow.
And, so did a lot of all of that and using computers in everyday life, right? But I didn't want to be a developer, though I had learned everything about it. So when I came out of college, my dad asked me, what do you want to do? So I said, maybe I want to learn how to hack. Right. At that time, nobody knew about hacking. Now, where do you learn about hacking in a country like India, which was not even talking about the word? So I landed up in an internet chat room and with a lot of different people who were all willing to teach you how to hack. Right.
Wow.
And I learned how to hack. Right. But in learning to hack, you also know that there is a good side of the part that you have to be in, and, which is to stop hackers from entering
Right.
a server. So one of the people in that chat room offered me a job. Right. And he said, this is an internship first. I will not pay you. And then you can join the organization if we think you are good enough. So I said, why not? So started working for this American firm, worked with them for 2 years. And, then on a shift, I was at there largely doing the India-Australia time zone. But my boss was in the US time zone. So he joined one of my shifts. And on that particular shift, I caught the hacker before he did. Which was very rare because if you know anything about mentors, you always believe they are better than you, right? And so was this person for me. And I asked him, I said, how come I beat you today? And he was so nice in telling me, the period that you've known me, I have always been paralyzed. He had met with an accident in his life, which had left him paralyzed, totally neck down. He had no movement in his body. He could only move his head, right? And obviously, like you are looking right now, shocked, I was as shocked as that because this is somebody I had been working with and I had never ever thought he had a disability. So he told me, he says, I'm waiting for the technician to come in and Otherwise, you wouldn't have beaten me today. And I think that was it. I think that was the switch for me to realize that technology can truly make a difference. It was also the time that I think I honestly realized my own biases. Because when I heard the word paralyzed, the first thing that came to mind was, he can't be as fast as me. How could he have been doing all of this? I think those are the biases that we have. In my school, I don't remember a certain, even a single person with disability in my batch. So you never really interacted with people with disabilities. So I think he shifted that for me. And then, a few days later, he told me, he says, there's a concept called assistive technology and accessibility. Do you know about it? And I said, no. And that was my eye opener. So he himself used to use a sip and puff device, and he used to use a mouse pointer in his mouth. So he would use his mouth to move his mouse. And then, like you and I press a key press, he would breathe and it would be a key press. Right? Now, it was enamoring because power of technology was astounding. Very fortunate, I was holidaying in London. I walked into something called the Royal National Institute for the Blind, and that was the time Windows was becoming more graphical. Right? So I said, how do blind people use this? And that was my intrigue point as my first. Came back to India with all the technology, all the books I could find, everything. Started teaching two blind boys at home. Till a friend of mine challenged me and said, you spent 2 lakhs buying all this technology at that time, and this is, 93 to 95. And what a waste of money. When he said that, I turned around and said, what do you mean? And he said, you use it for 2 hours in a whole week because you have time to teach then, right? But the rest of the time, that resource is totally wasted. So he said, why don't you start a computer training center to teach? That was the genesis of the first ever computer training center for the visually impaired in India, right? Which before all of the current organizations who are working in that space. And we were very fortunate. We got funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We had other funders. But the one thing that kept nagging me when I was doing that even after teaching 300 odd people, the jobs they were yet getting were just telephone operators. Nobody wanted to give them more than that. Right? And there was one very prominent nonprofit in the blindness world. And when I went to approach them, they actually said, leave our premises. What you're talking about is not possible. Blind people can't use computers. Right? So going from there, I realized I was looking at the problem incorrectly. Right? It was not a charity problem. It was an opportunity and an employment problem. So I said, how can I prove this? So I said, the first person who should employ them is me. Right? And then I went back to the thought of my boss, and he had told me about accessibility. And I said, and I'm a techie. So if I join all of that, can I make an organization? So today what you see of Barrier Break is exactly that. It's 3 things that we are set up on. One is we employ people with disabilities. Right? Today about 40% of our workforce comprises of disabled people, which is physically challenged, deaf and hard of hearing, visually impaired, autism, etc. The second thing is we said we will help tech companies to make their technology more accessible to people with disabilities and help them understand what they need. And the third was we said we will never be a charity. We will be a sustainable business model. And that's truly the genesis of Barrier Break then, where we started off with working in the space of web accessibility, making websites accessible, because that was the time that the web was just taking off in the world.
Was it been approx?
This would have been about 2008, 2009.
Okay.
Right? So I started the company in 2004.
Okay.
Right? In 2008, 2009 is when we started really pushing the government to make it happen. So 2004 to 2008, we spent time working on the space of, getting our knowledge together, getting our people trained, getting teams put together, etc. So it's been a long, long journey. I laugh about it. But we started advocating for the first time in 2004 when we went to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment and told them about digital accessibility. So Chitra, Barrier Break was basically formulated on 3 principles. The first was we said we would employ people with disabilities. So 40% of our team comprises of people with disabilities. So we hire people who are deaf and hard of hearing, visually impaired, physically challenged, people with autism, neurodivergent, etc. The second thing that we said was we will help companies make their technology accessible. Their websites, their mobile apps. There's so much technology out in the world which is inaccessible, and very few people are helping them to make that accessible. And the third that we said was we wouldn't be a charity. We wanted to be a sustainable business model. We wanted to walk away from that mindset that disability is entrenched with. And I think, that is really what we started to do. Flip to today, we are in, to 2025, we are about 270 employees. We service a global marketplace. Our largest customer base is the US. So you can, I actually smile and sit back and say, we from India are developing and delivering things for the US markets. And it's people with disabilities from India also adding to that.
Part of the workforce.
Yeah. So when I started, the thought was always that I wanted to do for India. But there was no buy-in from the Indian tech industry. There was no need. They'd always say, if somebody sues us, we'll think about accessibility then. Right? So it was about survival. So survival made us go to the US markets. And I think it was one of our best decisions because we've grown as an organization. And because we've grown, today when India truly needs us to help make the technology in India accessible, we're there. We're here to be able to take on that challenge and support organizations to do it.
I still remember how beautiful your office, the large office that you had at Goregaon, and very clearly remember what you said in terms of seeing people with various kind of disabilities and part of your workforce. Hats off to you guys. You began with that and you continued, and the strength is so large now. Well, one additional question in this is, what are the laws for India in terms of accessibility in this digital space, Shilpi?
So actually, we've had a guideline since 2009 called the Guideline for Indian Government Websites. Right now, this is a guideline which also has accessibility within it, and it's harmonized with the international standards. Right from the day one, which is a web content accessibility guideline. But this guideline was always voluntary. It wasn't mandatory. With RPWD, Rights for Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016, the law actually required that accessibility be focused on in different areas: built environment, ICT, transportation, etc. Now, ICT was one of the biggest components within that for us to focus on. Obviously, the others are also very critical to build inclusion.
For the layperson, ICT is?
Information communication technology, which means websites, mobile apps, ATMs, kiosks, washing machines, anything that has ICT within it. So anything that has technology within it, right? And the law was basically drafted to say that the Department of Persons with Disabilities needs to come out with certain standards and guidelines that everybody needs to adhere to. Right. So they obviously put out the first notification requiring that we meet the guideline for Indian government websites. The second thing that happened in India was under the Bureau of Indian Standards, we came up with a new guideline called IS 17802. And under IS 17802, it has all of the accessibility requirements that are needed, again in ICT. Right? Now, this is the guideline which looks at everything, whether it's web, it's mobile, whether it's documents, whether it's ICT-based products like washing machines, Xerox machines, etc. And it's fully encompassing. So today we have these two guidelines. Right? As per the notification now, every private and public organization in India needs to ensure that their ICT solutions are accessible. So think your website. If you are an employer, right, you might have an HRM system in your organization that people are using. If you are, let's say, e-commerce website and you are selling goods in India, your website must be accessible. If you are an OTT platform and you are showing movies and entertainment online, you should be accessible. If you are an educational platform, you need to be accessible. Whether you have a website, a mobile app, I would even go down to say even a game needs to be accessible in today's day and age. Right? But, it's the last couple of years that we are now seeing that this entire shift. The other thing that happened in India last year was we had the Rajiv Raturi case versus the Union of India, right? And the Supreme Court actually went on record and said that accessibility is a fundamental right for people with disabilities. And it told the government that you need to set up non-negotiable minimum standards, right? Now we're waiting to see what those standards are going to be. We are hoping it's the IS 17802. Okay. So now it's going to be fun because this is the first time that the Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities has written to, I think, 155 organizations or more and asked them how accessible are their websites. And if they are not, they have told them to hire an access auditor like us to do an accessibility check and to fix these problems. So for the first time, in 20 odd years, India is finally moving in the direction we had hoped. So that is what we have in India today.
Okay, super. So, in addition, you also have 247 accessible documents that you've set up. So, what is this about? What does this company do?
So when we started solving the problem of websites, right? Every website has a lot of documents on it. You have these PDF files you have to download. You have these PowerPoint slides people might give you, Word files you might have to fill up a form on, etc. But most of these are inaccessible to people with disabilities, right? So if I am a visually impaired person and I'm using my screen reader and trying to fill up a PDF form to apply for a bank, a loan, it doesn't work for me. Right. So we had to solve these problems. So because of that, we started focusing on document accessibility on the side. And it's been interesting because customers are finally realizing the need to ensure that it's not only their websites and mobile apps, but also these. So imagine, you go to a bank and you have a savings account with them, and they send you a PDF of your bank statement, right? And you can't use it. Right? What are you going to do about it? Most of the organizations that you work with will give you a terms and conditions, which is a PDF. You don't know what you're signing up to. So the problems start from there.
Right. So, I think my next question was actually about, why do you think digital accessibility is critical for people with disabilities? I think you already gave it so beautifully in terms of this particular example. But to elaborate more, how does it, help them in their daily lives?
For sure. So I think that's a very, very critical question for everybody to understand because I think there's a misnomer about this. Firstly, the misnomer, the myth is that, it's only for visually impaired. That's the first assumption everybody makes, which it's not. Right. The accessibility standard is for all disabilities. There are different requirements for different groups of people. Right. So, for example, let's say I have to go and buy clothes and I'm shopping on an e-commerce website. Now, when I go to this website, there are lots of images. Lots of us actually choose clothes based on what we see. Right. Now, as a visually impaired person, I can't see this image. Right. So, what happens to me? So, we are saying in such a case, you must have an image description which describes this image for a visually impaired person. Right. Now, on the same e-commerce website, right? E-commerce websites are quite complex, right? You have lots of drop-down menus, you have lots of choices, lots of things. Now, if I'm somebody with a physical disability and I can't use a mouse, right? Or I have cerebral palsy or I have other challenges and I cannot use a mouse, but I need to use a keyboard for whatever reason. But so many of these websites don't work without a mouse, right? They just don't work. So what are you doing? You're basically telling someone you can't access these menus. So you've closed the door on me and you've put me outside the system. Now, if I go to people who are deaf and hard of hearing, right? Today, video is the format of the future, right? We are recording this podcast, right? If I am deaf, how am I going to experience this, right? Today, if you go to some of the OTT platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime, you will see they provide subtitles. They provide audio description for visually impaired people, right? And it is such a need of the hour. Now, if I come to people who have cognitive issues, right? Now, one of the things might be iconography. Somebody might not be able to read the text very clearly, but the icons may help them identify what it is. it's the consistent navigation, because you can't keep changing the focus of everything because it'll confuse some of the users who are working with it. Right? It's about simplifying the content, or even giving them a simpler approach to look at the same page, right? And making it easier for them to work with it. So if you see, there is something for everybody. And these are just few of the disabilities I've talked about. There's colorblindness, there are people with epilepsy. There are so many other groups that get impacted. And today, I think you and I are really living in a digital world. We do less in the real world of it, or the physical world of it, than we do in our digital world today. Right? So if I can, order my taxi sitting at home, or I can order my food, or I can bank online, or I can even have a control that says that when my child is spending some money, I need to be informed of it. All of this will only happen if we make all of these websites and mobile apps accessible to people with disabilities. Right. And that's where the shift is going to come. So if we don't do this, right, all that we're creating is a world which is inaccessible to people with disabilities. And then we expect them to jump over all these hurdles and somehow manage, right? But that is really not what the world should be in 2025. And I think that's what digital accessibility does. To have people who, to even simplify it a little further for some people, right? It's like you say, when, you enter a building, you look for a ramp, you look for an elevator, you look for stairs. There are options for somebody to use. Digital accessibility is giving somebody the option in the digital world to do something in the way that they want to do it. And that's really as simple as it goes, right? And, I think it's just everybody's fundamental.
So right, yeah, that it has to be there. And I guess continuing with what you shared, if there's a law in place, it's something that, are you going to wait for someone to figure out that you haven't done it, or are you going to adopt it and you're going to see to it that, okay, I also am going to be able to do everything that's required to get this population. Somebody said it very nicely on one of my podcasts that whenever you set up a business, if you were to think that one of my users, one of my consumers is a person with a disability, could be across any kind of disability, then you would automatically be setting up for inclusion properly.
Sadly, the mindset in India is yet assuming that people with disabilities are not their customer base.
Yes.
Right? I yet know when I've gone to banks and I've told them, can you make your banking applications accessible? And it's, we don't have people with disabilities. And I'm sitting in a room with people who have low vision themselves, who have near or far sightedness, right? And it's simple things. You and I do pinch and zoom on our phone all the time. Right? Look at word prediction. It's been a game changer for all of us.
Yeah.
It was never made for us. It was made for people who were dyslexic.
Absolutely.
Right? And we're the ones using it, right? Look at Google Maps, right? All of us are using the auditory support to listen to the navigation rather than see it. So there are so many good things about accessibility, and accessibility actually creates interesting new ways for people to interact with solutions.
Absolutely.
Right.
Very well said.
So, it's truly innovative when you think about it. And then you think about all these technologies, and they've become ubiquitous to your and my life,
Yeah.
right? And, so I don't know how people can say no,
Yeah.
but they yet do. So, yes, we are hoping the rights for persons with disabilities and what the Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities is doing right now will nudge people forward. And hopefully, we will have a better and accessible India.
Yeah. Shilpi, you also had a huge product range for people with disabilities. How is that doing?
So we started importing products years back, largely because I realized that parents couldn't afford to go abroad, find these products, bring them into India, etc. We did it for about 12 years. I'm sad to say that we had to shut that service down and that division down. We actually never couldn't even break even. We were always loss making. I know the cost of products is prohibitive, but it was also the cost of custom duty, taxes over it, which made it totally unaffordable for people. So even if you go out in the world and say, we're a large group of people, can you help us with a better pricing mechanism? But India wasn't ready to buy. I think that's when you and I met, when we were looking at an AAC device for your son. And I think that's a very critical thing to realize, that, people look at assistive technology as an expense. They don't really look at it as assistive technology as an aid to give a better, life and a better experience to the person who needs it. But, we have a new side to that. Today, I think the mobile phone is changing a lot.
Yes.
There's a lot of technology which now does not need to be hardware based, but can be on your mobile apps or, or your iPads, etc. So I think we are looking at a better future, but sadly we had to shut that division. And I think that's where the sustainability of the business comes into play. Yes.
So, Shilpi, what have been some of the toughest challenges that you've faced in this entire, digital journey? Can you please share with us?
So I think the first challenge that we really faced from day one, that whenever we talked about ourselves, everybody thought we were a non-profit. And the assumption was you'll do it for free because disabled ke liye hai. I think that was the biggest bias that we had to overcome, I think. The second, I think, was that, we didn't really have legislation in the country. Right? It has taken us, I think, from 2008 when I started working with Javed Avidi, it has taken us years till 2016 when we got accessibility finally written in the law.
Right.
And that was a long time to do advocacy and policy building, etc. So I think that was the second biggest hurdle. The third was about survival, right, as a business, right? So, it's great to say you want to employ people with disabilities, but then you have to pay them.
Yeah.
Right? It's great to say that, you want to grow a large team, but how do you make this viable, right? So I'll give you an instance. So today, I would say that about 80% of our business comes from the US market. But when I first went to the US, trying to pitch our business to customers, my first ever conference, not a single person spoke to me. I was the only Indian at that conference, but not a single person spoke to me. Today, in that same conference, I am, recognized, known, have created a footing because the accessibility world was so new.
Yeah.
Right. And people didn't know each other. And, where is this one young girl coming all the way from India? There were all those biases that you had to deal with. It wasn't without that. And I think the fourth one I'd like to talk about is, having the financial support to be able to do it. People think it just happens. Right? You need money to be able to run an organization. Right? And I don't know, some of you might know that we did have a social enterprise that invested in us called Avishkar. But we were very clear that we wanted to do what we wanted to do. And our board was very nice to give me the option to take the direction I wanted to take. Because if they had said no, profitability is the only thing you're going to work on, then we wouldn't have made it there. So having the financial backing, of our other investors, like my parents, really helped me to keep grounded. Because there was a time that we were loss making.
Obviously.
Right. And we were majorly into debt.
Right.
Right. And then from there to resurrect and come out of it, you needed that lifeline. Sometimes people ask me as a women entrepreneur, how did you do this? Because generally people say, parents will not take loans for you, right? They'll take it for boys, they won't take it for girls. And these are kind of questions that people have always asked me. And I've always turned around and said, I've never had any of those problems. My parents just stood by me and said, we think you're doing the right thing, right? And we will support you all the way. Till a couple of years back when my dad turned around and said, you've done it all. You've turned the tide, you've repaid us, you've given us a return on our money, and you yet to work in a space which creates impact in the world and makes the world a better place for people with disabilities. So I think it's inspiring sometimes when I think of my own story, but I also realize that you have to be willing to stay the course.
True.
Right. And I was hearing you earlier on with your story, and it takes a lot of courage to stay that course and to actually make it happen. And I think that's what's done it for us, honestly.
Really, I mean, we can just think a little bit about that struggle that you must have gone through. As you rightly said, in this space, I mean, being part of a parent support group, being a trust ourselves, I know how difficult it is for anyone to, kind of shell money and say that, okay, I need the service, I'm willing to pay for it. So from there, doing everything on your own, getting your own funding in place must have been really, really tough. And to top it, you employed and you made so many families think that their individuals with disability can actually earn. I can't think of anything else that is so impactful. It's brilliant, really. What you and your team have achieved is superb. And I think going forward also, I mean, whatever are your plans, really, all the best to you for this. I mean, you've sustained, you're a profitable business and you're thinking of doing much more. And only the side effects of it is that you're actually impacting society, which I guess not many businesses would be able to talk about.
Thank you for that. I think it all credit goes to my parents.
And to top it, you're a woman.
That I think is
like full double bonus.
I would have to agree, honestly.
And so, yeah, as you shared, how a family, now coming to the other side of it, how can family and friends become better allies in promoting digital accessibility and inclusion, according to you?
So, firstly, I think families and friends need to realize that, their family who has a disability also needs to use the same technology like them. That's the first realization, right? Whether you are a parent, whether you are a sibling, whether you are an employer, right? You need to give people with disabilities the same equitable access, right? Which means that if you see challenges in that person with disability interacting with those devices, you should inform those organizations and highlight that concern. And, educate them that there is something called accessibility. Why don't you look at it? Because there are things for all different people with disabilities. It's about the ask, right? Now, if you are, let's say, you have a bank account. Let's take a very simple example, right? Now, and your child has a disability, whatever that disability might be. Now, the child is also probably going to have an account in that same bank, right? Now, you are a customer, you are a paying customer. You are somebody, and even the child is actually contributing to the economy, right? Why is it that we can't stand up and say, this is not going to work as a flow, right? Or this is too difficult for, person X to be able to work with, right? How can we simplify it based on what that person's need is? The technical aspects are obviously there, but like I said, it's very simple things, right? Sometimes it's iconography, sometimes it's font, sometimes it's spacing, sometimes it's heading, sometimes it's images. There's simple things for somebody to do. But if you don't educate your bank or, whatever you are, purchasing from or working with whichever organization, you are going to have a gap. So I think the key is for us to be advocates, right? Today, very often in digital accessibility, it's only the blindness community that's coming forward and raising their voice. Everybody else is sitting quietly on the sideline saying this doesn't impact us, right? But if your child is using, a text-to-speech software, right? Or if your child wants to use Alexa to tell it that, play music for me, shouldn't that be accessible? So I think that is the need for parents to become advocates about digital accessibility, right? And if ever, we'd love to do a small workshop for parents, just helping them understand how they can go and advocate for them.
It'd be lovely. I think I'm definitely going to reach out to you on that. We need to do that because I think, as you rightly said, parents themselves don't know that this is the right. And very often when it comes to our PWD's rights, we've seen that parents themselves don't know that they're supposed to ask for it. They're supposed to take priority. They're supposed to ask for, that extra thing to help their children. They always shy away and they feel that this is not for me. And more often they're at home rather than being out there where the child needs to be.
Exactly. And I think that's the gap.
True. So, how can we advocate more for more systemic, changes? And what do you think? I mean, you're already doing so much. What more can everyone do together?
Well, I think everyone has to become the voice for digital accessibility, not one or the other. So asking that question is the first thing that you have to do. Do you take care of the needs of my child or my person, whoever that person is? When you are going and procuring something, right? So I think every one of us today has a microwave in our house, right? When you go and buy that microwave, asking the question, if your child can't read it, will it talk to them? Will it give them inputs? If we start asking these questions, people will start to realize, right, what is required. So I think that's the first thing that we need to do systemically. The second thing that we need to do systemically is, accept that people with disabilities have to use mainstream technology. The people aren't necessarily going to go out and make a separate banking app for someone, right? So don't ask for things separated. Ask to make the existing solutions inclusive, right? And adapt them for the needs of people with disabilities. That is a very important thing for everybody to understand. The third is, don't wait for your child or person to become old. Accessibility is a need that if you teach them technology at a younger age, right, they will learn to grow with it. Today, if you give a kid a phone, he learns it faster than you and I, right? As adults, we take longer to. Uh, Parents take too long to give assistive technology to their children.
I agree.
They keep waiting for it, right? And that wait is just extending that time out for that child to get used to something and makes it more difficult. So I think these are the things that we need to do. And then we need to ask right from schooling, do you use assistive technology in the classroom? What is the assistive technology that you are using? How does your child start to integrate with it? And if that starts to happen, I can tell you that a lot of kids that today who are not getting integrated will get integrated because they are used to that technology from a very early age, right? And they grow with it and learn with it. And those technologies have things that will help them do things better. And you can always, integrate other technologies. And today the world is so different from 20 years back.
Yeah.
Right. So why are we, not getting on this bus? And why are we willing to live without technology for our children? And I think that's the systemic change we need from, parents and allies as a whole.
Perfect. I mean, very, very well, sir. Thank you. So, coming to, I guess, my last session is last part of the session is that you've had a beautiful journey, and you obviously have made plans for barrier break 247 accessible documents, and I think also Newshook that you've set up. Also, what is your vision for the future overall? I mean, in your babies, in your companies, as well as otherwise, for in general for digital accessibility.
So I think from a barrier break perspective, we have always been a service company largely till date. We are now becoming a product company also.
Okay.
Right. So I think that is one of the biggest things that we are doing. So we are creating accessibility products which companies can use to make their products more accessible.
Okay.
And I think you are the first podcast I'm stating this on live because the product is only going to be launched in 2 weeks' time.
All the best.
Thank you so much. So I think that's the one shift because India doesn't necessarily create a lot of products yet, right? So we want to be that. In a global spectrum, I think we have a great standing in the world. But I think we want to aim higher than that. And we want to put India on the map, saying that we are the company and the place of choice for accessibility. On a personal front, you know, I would love to see digital accessibility taught in schools and colleges, right? Because when those young kids make that PowerPoint, and if that PowerPoint is accessible in their presentation at that young age, then everything they do after that, they will remember inclusion, right? And for, I think society at large, that's one thing I want to do, which is take the concepts of inclusion early into schools and colleges. And yeah, I think that is more than enough for me to be able to achieve in the next couple of years.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think truly whatever you're doing, whatever you've done till now is extremely inspiring. The the path you chose to take, I think many people could have easily said nahi hoga, and they could have just fallen off, but you stuck to it, and it's so nice that you have such a army behind you, supported you through thick and thin, and you've come to this space now that you're known in the world, which is so amazing internationally. And I think I learned a lot personally, although I am a parent and I understand about rights, but still you explained it so beautifully, that about early accessibility, about early teaching your individuals earlier on in life, exposing them to everything, which is what I would like to tell to all of the parents who are listening, that this is so crucial, and we miss out on this. We keep thinking, nahi aayega, can't do it, can't, maybe later, older. And you keep delaying that process, and you are keeping away, you're actually hindering the adaptability earlier on. That's the second thing, which was very beautiful. And finally, I think your repetitive insistence on getting this into schools and in colleges, I think the larger impact of that is, the more the demand, people will supply. Today, if you're not asking at all and we don't know what to ask for, we are in the wrong. So, thank you for that direction, and thank you for articulating it so beautifully, Shilpi. And really, thanks a lot, and all the very best to your company and to your team. May you grow really large. We need people like you who are out there thinking for a lot of people who are completely not, either they don't know or they're not asking, and you're there doing it on their behalf. So thanks a ton.
Thank you for inviting me, Chitra. It's been a pleasure. I think this was long overdue between you and me to sit down and talk to each other. Forget the podcast. But I think what you've done with, the autism space in Bombay is something that I have admired, right? I think when I think of autism and Mumbai, you're one of those names that pops up in my mind. And I think my team can say that to you very often. So I think it has to be a collective. I sometimes feel bad that I had to shut the assistive technology division down, but I was a realist in that point. But I'm hoping that we can do more with you, parents and others, and help educate people. Thank you so much. Thank you.